Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webcast. It is Friday, April 18th, 2025. I'm South Ops meteorologist Eric Drewitz. Looking at the water vapor satellite imagery, you can see that we have a trough moving southeastward across the Rocky Mountains towards the Four Corners region. You see that counterclockwise flow over here, and then weak ridging over the eastern Pacific in the wake of the trough. Looking at the visible satellite imagery, you can see that we have a very strong marine layer this morning as widespread fog and low clouds along the California coast, stretching from the Bay Area down to San Diego, as well as lots of low and medium level clouds across the Central Valley and portions of the Western Sierra, as well as the western Southern California mountains. Here's the latest RTMA comparison, a 24-hour comparison for temperature. And as you can see, temperatures are a few degrees cooler this morning compared to yesterday morning across portions of the Sierra and the northern deserts. Otherwise, temperatures look to be about around the same as they were yesterday morning. Latest 24-hour RTMA relative humidity comparison shows much drier conditions across portions of the Sierra and the northern deserts this morning compared to the same time yesterday morning. More humid across portions of the Central Valley, Central Coast interior, stretching into the upper deserts and the Central Mojave and down to the lower eastern deserts. Also a little bit drier this morning than yesterday morning across western Riverside County. Looking at the RTMA 24-hour wind comparison, we could see why those areas in the Sierra and the northern deserts are much drier today than yesterday. It looks a bit more breezy today, as well as the winds today are coming out of the northwest to northeast, so coming off of the deserts of Nevada. So that is allowing for those locally drier conditions today. But areas further south, especially as you get towards the upper deserts and the Central Mojave, it looks like the winds are more westerly. So that'll allow for onshore winds, which will keep relative humidities higher than areas in the eastern Sierras as well as the northern deserts. Looking at the latest RTMA RH analysis, you could see the sharp cutoffs going from very high RH to very low RH as you descend on the leeward sides of the Sierras, as well as drive northward through the upper deserts or the Central Mojave into the northern deserts. And like I said, that's due to winds coming off Nevada for those areas in the northern deserts and the lee of the Sierras, but onshore flow everywhere else. So pretty stark contrast there. But most of the area quite humid this morning with relative humidity values in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. A little drier out in the lower eastern deserts in the 50s and 60s, but for out in those locations, that's still quite humid. But the driest areas this morning, like I said, the northern deserts and the leeward sides of the Sierra. Here's the latest GFS 500 millibar height forecast, and that trough over the Rocky Mountains will continue to move eastward. A weak ridge of high pressure is expected to build across central and southern California this weekend, but that should be fairly short-lived as early next week, a weak trough moves again into the region, and it should linger the next several days. And it looks like there could be a chance of another trough that'll be deeper during the late week next week into next weekend, but the details are still yet to come on that. Here's the GFS wind forecast, and you can see over the next few days, looks like we'll still have that north-northwest and north-northeast flow coming off Nevada into the northern deserts and the eastern Sierra, so that'll help keep those areas dry. But fortunately, it should be localized to those areas because it looks like we'll still have onshore flow west of the mountains or very weak winds if it's not onshore flow. And then as we get later to the weekend and early next week, we're looking at onshore flow increasing and returning, and similar wind patterns than day to day every day thereafter, where onshore flow will be stronger in the afternoon, weaker at night, but no strong offshore winds are expected. Here's the latest GFS precipitation rate forecast. And we're looking at the chance of some shower or wet thunderstorm activity this afternoon. Tomorrow and Sunday looks to be quite dry. And then as we get into early next week, we could see that chance return on a day-to-day basis of a pop-up a shower or wet thunderstorm, but no significant precipitation is expected at this time. Here's the latest National Weather Service maximum temperature forecast, and today's supposed to be the coolest day over the next few days, where we're expecting highs in the upper 50s along the immediate coast, getting into the 60s, mid 60s across LA and the Inland Empire, 70s for the Central Valley, Central Coast Interior, and the deserts. And then over the next few days, looks like we'll warm up a little bit. This is tomorrow. We'll jump up into the mid to upper 60s to mid 70s for LA and the Inland Empire, 60s along the coast, 80s in the Central Valley and portions of the Central Coast Interior as well as the deserts. Continue to warm up on Sunday, as on Sunday we'll start to get into the mid to upper 70s across LA and the Inland Empire, mid 60s to low 70s along the coast, mid 80s across Central Valley, and anywhere from the low to upper 80s in the deserts to cracking 90 in the lower deserts. And then Monday looks a little bit warmer than that. And then should generally stay the same for Tuesday. And then Wednesday, it looks like we'll start a cooling trend again as we get later in the week. Here's the National Weather Service minimum relative humidity forecast. And today, RHs are expected to be quite elevated, with minimum relative humidity remaining above 50% for a lot of the South Coast. As you go from Santa Barbara down to San Diego, everything should remain above 50%. The windward sides of the Southern California mountains look to be even more humid, with relative humidity values generally in the 70 to 80% range for minimum RH. Quite humid, too, along the western-facing sides of the southern Sierra. And then slightly drier as you get into the Central Valley and the Central Coast Interior, where we're expecting minimum relative humidity values to be somewhere in that 30 to 50% range. Then drier out as you get into the deserts, as usual, and in the eastern portions of the deserts, we could see that RH less than 15%, especially as you get into the northern deserts, where the winds today are expected to come off of Nevada. Then as we get into tomorrow is supposed to be the driest day. Over the next few days, the minimum RHs will then decrease into that 20 to 40% range for areas west of the mountains. And in the deserts, we're expecting minimum RHs in that 5 to 15% range. But then as we get into Sunday, things will start to creep back up again. Where we'll still be in that 20 to 40% range west of the mountains, but much higher along the coasts, and the higher relative humidity along the coast will extend a little further inland on Sunday. And then the deserts will start to creep up towards that 10 to 15% range, and then that'll continue on Monday. And very similar Tuesday, Wednesday, though the RHs will creep up areas west of the mountains, and then we'll be in that mainly in that 10 to 20% range for the deserts at that point in time. Here's the National Weather Service critical fire weather forecast, which shows you areas where the forecast relative humidity is less than or equal to 15%, while at the same time the forecast sustained wind speed is greater than or equal to 25 miles an hour. So those areas are shaded in red. You'll see some of that today over the northern deserts, as we'll have those strong north-northwest and north-northeast winds coming off Nevada into the northern deserts, and with low RH. But it should generally be confined to there and maybe portions of the far eastern Sierra. But everywhere else won't see any conditions near that. And then that should drop off tomorrow, as the winds tomorrow are expected to be much lighter than today. So here's the latest 7-day large fire potential outlook, and as you can see, we have a minimal risk for the next 7 days across all 16 PSAs, just because the live fuel component is the much bigger portion of the fuel load. There's a lot more live fuel out there than dead fuel right now, and the live fuel we're continuing to see green up. So the fuels, broadly speaking, are expected to remain unfavorable to ignitions at this time, and will generally continue to remain that way with the current and upcoming weather pattern. Here's the latest Climate Prediction Center 6 to 10 day temperature and precipitation outlooks, which are valid from April 23rd through April 27th. And for temperature, the odds either show a slight tilt towards below normal temperatures for areas along the coast, and areas a bit more inland, a slight tilt towards near normal temperatures during this time, as well as a slight tilt towards near normal precipitation at this time. That concludes today's webcast. The next webcast will be on Monday. See you then.